Good afternoon. Welcome. I am Chris Kane, Executive Director of CPWR, the Center for Construction Research and Training. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Pre-Task Planning, or PTP, through Post-Job Review, CPWR's Guidelines and Applied Resources. Thank you so much for joining us. This presentation is the capstone on a short series of webinars that Dr. Babak Memarian pre-task planning project. Our host, Jessica Bunting, will drop links into the two previous webinars in the chat. Today, we're going to hear about how CPWR has developed an all-in-one pre-task planning package available for free on cpwr.com. Jessica will be moderating the Q&A session at the end of Babak's prepared remarks. We will do our best to get through as many questions as we can at the end of the webinar, including those that were submitted in advance. And now I'm pleased to introduce Babak Memarian. I have your title written on here, Babak, but we're changing your title. So I'm going to call you your new title, Director of Safety Research at CPWR. Thank you, Babak, and please get started.
Thank you, Chris. Hello, everyone. I am Babak, CPWR's Director of Exposure Control Technologies Research. Today, we will have a quick overview of our pre-task planning resources and tools that we have recently developed and released through CPWR.com. But before I start, I would like to acknowledge my colleagues on this project, Sarah Brooks, our industrial hygienist at CPWR, Chris Lee, our solutions program manager, and Daniel Merabi. Daniel is a Ph.D. candidate at Arizona State University, and he worked as an intern this past summer with us on this project. As Chris mentioned, this is the third webinar that we are given on pre-task planning as part of our larger project on prevention through augmented pre-task planning, which is funded by NIOSH through 2024. And in this project, the overall goal is to improve the quality of pre-task planning in construction, identifying gaps and shortcomings in the process, and coming up with some effective strategies. And more importantly, that is going to be our focus today, is to develop applied tools to help practitioners initiate, assess, and improve their PTP processes. Just giving recommendations may not be really helpful to practitioners, and we always get this question that, do you have any tools for us to help us through the process? So this webinar is all about the tools that we have developed and released. So we will see examples, we'll see questionnaires, we'll see templates that we have developed all in one place today. But just for a couple of minutes, I would like to talk about pre-task planning, why we have focused on this. And today I'm going to stay slightly away from the research side of the project, and we'll focus more on application. But why pre-task planning? In theory and by definition, pre-task planning is a process performed before each task starts. And it's a proactive approach to identify hazards associated with each task, tools, equipment, work processes, materials, and also identifying and employing effective controls to create a safer and healthier workplace for construction workers. So by definition, it is simple. But is it really working? Is it functional? So that was the main question for our research. And we know that there is some huge gap in this process. The very first one is even a huge deal of inconsistency across the industry in terms of terminology used by different companies. Some people call it job hazard analysis. Some people call it job safety analysis, activity hazard analysis, morning huddles, pre-task planning. Are they the same? We don't know, because people use these terms interchangeably. Some people say that JHA is for more critical and more complicated tasks, and pre-task planning is just for every day, but JHA is not for every day. So there is no consistency across the board. So this was the main reason we decided to work on pre-task planning and see where the gaps are, and what strategies we could use to improve the quality of the whole process. To answer these questions, we went to practitioners, people who do the actual work, people who deal with site safety and health planning. We talked to 52 construction managers and health and safety practitioners, 132 one-on-one interviews with construction workers on job sites. We went to the job site with Chris and Sarah and observed some pre-task planning sessions closely to see the shortcomings, inconsistencies across even within a company, not comparing one company to another, even within the company, we saw a lot of inconsistency in practices that they were using. We analyzed 30 sample pre-task plans and JHA forms to see similarities, inconsistencies, gap in the process. And also we worked with an industry advisory group to help us through the process, to give us feedback on our research project, on products that we were planning to develop. But one important thing that I would like to discuss before going to the webpage and talking about the tools that we have developed, back to that pre-task planning topic and why we focused on that. These days, we see technology is moving pretty fast. Mobile applications, AR, VR, drones, robotics, automation. These are all really cool products. We love them. They're great. But sometimes we need to go back and revisit the basics. And that's what I love to do. And in most of my research project, I'd really like to go and revisit the basics, the basic definitions. What are the essentials? Whether we have a good understanding of the definition when we say pre-task planning, whether workers have a good understanding of the whole process, whether they realize the importance of the process or not, have we done a good job in introducing the topic to our practitioners? Have we listened to their concerns and complaints? So that is very important to revisit these basics. Again, I'm repeating this because it's important. Technology, nobody can deny that. It is great, we need that, but if we don't know the basics, if we don't know those fundamental things, we will become just an operator. But to avoid that, to make sure that we understand the value of each of these products, we need to know the basics of that. So, as we conducted this study over the past 4 years, as we learn from workers, as we learn from practitioners, as we learn from our own direct observations, we started putting some products together. But we didn't plan for all these products in the beginning. So we took an agile approach. So we tried to readjust our research project and research process based on the recommendations and industry demand, what practitioners wanted from us. So after we completed the first phase of the project, if you attended our webinar earlier this year on PTP assessment checklist from management perspective, that was the very first product that we put together. And then after that, we gave a webinar and we received feedback from users, from practitioners, from attendees to see, okay, how we can improve that. What should be the next step? What is the next logical step? So with all that, we developed these tools and products that you see on the screen. And we made all these available in one place through a CPWR website, cpwr.com/PTP. So you can go to that website, to that web page, and see all this in one place. That I will walk you guys through very quickly, see what we have, and then we'll discuss each tool and each product with some examples and a little more in depth. This is the web page that I just mentioned. This is where you can find all these tools and resources. We have provided hyperlinks to the comprehensive implementation and assessment package that we have developed, which is the very first hyperlink. And then we have provided individual links to each of these tools, questionnaires, checklists that are also in that comprehensive package in the first hyperlink. So let's take a quick look at the web page and see what we have there. So this is cpwr.com/PTP. You can come to this website, to this web page. And the very first link is the comprehensive package that I mentioned. And it contains, the first part of this package contains step-by-step guidelines for development and implementation of pre-task planning. As you see that we have provided sections, why it is important, how it should be implemented. We have some questions for people who would like to develop their pre-task plan, or they have established their PTP, but they would like to improve the quality of that. So these guidelines help them through the process. So, and the next part of this package is pre-task planning forms. So we have provided an example for a completed PTP form that I will talk more in detail shortly. And then we have provided a blank template for people to use. And then the next part is end of shift or a post-job review checklist that we'll discuss further today. And at the end, we have some assessment checklists. This is for management perspective. So managers can assess their process using this very brief checklist. It takes maybe just a couple of minutes to use it. And then at the end, we have workers' perspective to assess the quality of pre-task planning. So these are all in one place. But if you go to the web page, so you can see them all also available individually at the bottom of the page. You can see the sample completed pre-task planning. We have PTP, the blank form in PDF and Word format. And also we have other checklists that we'll discuss briefly today. So after we presented our work to the construction industry, working on pre-task planning, the very first question that we received was, especially from smaller contractors who have not established their PTP, that, hey, Babak, do you have a blank template? Do you have a template to give us, get this started? There are so many forms available online for JHA, PTP, JSA, but we tried to come up with a template based on our research findings and to address all the important elements that we have found throughout this study. So this blank template is available on the webpage I showed you, both in PDF and Word format, so you can download and use them easily. You can customize it based on your company's needs, based on your project needs, based on the task that you are planning to do. So that's very easy to download and use. And we have also provided a sample PTP that we will discuss that you can follow to develop your own pre-task plan. Here is the example that I also showed earlier on the web page that walks you through a step-by-step to see what elements should go into this form when you plan and want to develop your pre-task plan. Do pre-task plan before each task, at least once, and repeat that when the condition changes or when the task changes, or if there is any change in the job site condition or task condition, please record that and communicate that immediately with the crew. These are very important things to consider when you are developing and conducting your pre-task plans. I'm not going to discuss all these points one by one, but I would like to touch on a few important ones that I would like to discuss today with you and give some examples and things that we have learned from job sites. One of the very important things that we would like to emphasize is conducting daily walkthroughs and getting workers directly involved in this process. What is the reason for that? Daily walkthroughs help managers better understand the current site condition. That is very critical in pre-task planning, job hazard analysis, because construction job sites are dynamic and they constantly change. Some major pieces of equipment might be delivered to the job site. Some new work crews may come close to your crew. So these are all important things that should be captured and communicated immediately with the crew. So that is very important. And why workers should be involved. Workers perform the task. They are on the front line. They know all the challenges and issues better than anybody else. So we need to get them involved and constantly get their feedback throughout the process to improve it. If we want to see the gaps, if we want to identify shortcomings of the process, we need to talk to workers. We need to get them involved. And also that helps improve buy-in from workers' perspective. They can realize the importance and value of this process when they are directly involved, when they see their feedback is working. So that is a very important step. And as you see that, so each task is broken into smaller steps, hazards associated with each step, and controls available. So these are things that should be provided in a PTP form. And another important piece that we have implemented and we have considered in this form, at the bottom of the page, you see that staff responsible. It is very important to see who is responsible, who will check to see whether controls are implemented, whether there is any problem during the implementation of those controls, whether some controls are not really effective. So we need to have someone to follow up and check on those. Another important section that we have considered in our own template is crews working nearby. We don't see that often in other forms and templates. Why is it important? As I said, construction job sites are dynamic and they constantly change. There are sometimes there are other work crews coming and working close by to our work crew. And they might pose some hazards to our work crew and vice versa. Our work might put other crews at risk. So this is very important to identify these hazards, to identify which crews are working close by, what hazards might be posed by them, and what action items and what action plans we have to address that. So this is very important. Another piece that we learned directly from workers, and we added this to the form based on direct suggestion from workers. They ask for further information about the project, about the process, about the task, not only safety and health, because we typically see that PTP, JHA, JSA, these mainly focus on safety and health hazards. But it's very helpful to workers if we provide other pieces of information to give them a big picture of the job site. I remember from one of our site visits, and we learned a term from one of our research partners in DC. They were using a term called 720 awareness. Watch for your surroundings, above and below. It is very important to have that understanding about the job site, about everything around us. It's not all about our task. It's about the job site and other crews around us. What other information we need to get to that level of understanding. And also providing training to keep the process consistent, to make it consistent, to conduct it consistently. We have seen a lot of poor presentation skills or very inconsistent. So that is important within a company. They provide that training to workers, to crew supervisors, to conduct and also complete pre-task plans. That is very important. And we have provided information in the package how to do it. Some step-by-step guidelines to train your work crews and workers to better conduct and complete their pre-task plans. One of the very important tools that we have developed in this study, and we don't see that very often in other packages in other companies, it's post-job review or end-of-shift review. Why is it important? It is important because we want to see what worked versus what didn't work. We plan something before task. We plan something early in the morning. We go to the job site. But at the end, whether it worked as we planned, where we had issues, where we had problems, whether we have any conflicts with other trades, whether we had any conflicts within our own crew, did we have all the material and tools that we had planned for the task? Did we have any issues with them? So this is very important to have a closure at the end of the shift. Some people may say, oh, it is too frequent. Every day we cannot do that. It's too much of time. It may take just a couple of minutes just to huddle back with the crew and go over this. We have developed this checklist for you to follow, to handle your post-job review. If you cannot do that every day, do it once a week at the end of the week to see what worked versus what didn't work, what adjustments we need to make. It is too late when we go to the job site and we think, oh, okay, now we need to change the plan. We need to know this information beforehand, the day before. It is very helpful if we know all this beforehand, in advance, to say, okay, we need to make some changes to our material. And more importantly, when we use a checklist like this, when we use a form like this, and if we save them and if we analyze them, throughout the project life cycle, we can see that where we have the majority of issues. What are the more frequent issues that we face every day or every week? At the end of the project, if you do this every day or every week, you will see that at the end, the top issues that you had throughout this specific project, for instance. You had conflicts with crews. With which crews? What was the issue? How you tried to resolve it, and whether it worked or not. So this is very important to do a post-job or end-of-shift review with your crew, and it helps you establish some continuous improvement process to learn and adjust and check again. I have provided the link, the direct link to download this checklist at the bottom of the page, and also this is available on that web page that I presented earlier. We have developed PTP. We have done end of shift, but as managers, we want to see that whether our pre-task plan, whether our process follows some of the recommended practices by our own peers, by industry practitioners. These are not best practices. I never call anything best practices. These are some good practices, some recommended practices. So you can use this checklist to check your PTP process against these recommended practices. And if you answer no to any of these questions, so you can go back to the package that I presented today and see how you could improve that specific element of your PTP. So we call this pre-task planning assessment checklist for managers, from management perspective. But initially, when we developed that and I presented, I called it a vital check for managers, because they can easily, in a minute or two, they can check their process to see whether they follow or not. But the assessment is not complete from just our own perspective, from managers' perspective, people who develop PTP. Like any other products, if we want to get a good understanding of the issues in the process, if we do really want to find the gap and shortcomings of the process, we need to go and talk to our users, people who use the product. Here, the product is our pre-task plans. Who are the users? Workers are the main users. Every day they deal with it. And they will have the best understanding of the process, and they can give us exactly what the problems are, where the gaps are, and if they have any recommendations to fix them. So to help contractors establish this, if you would like to assess your PTP once every couple months or even once throughout the process, throughout the project, we have developed a questionnaire for you. And this is pre-task planning assessment questionnaire from workers' perspective. You can do that yourself, or you can maybe hire a third party to come and handle this for you. And when you do this assessment for the first time, because most of these questions are on Likert scale, and you can see that how you perform, you can start creating a baseline for your own company. And when the next time you conduct this assessment, you can see that whether you have improved, or the points that you identify throughout the first assessment, whether you've been able to address some of those, whether the scores are improving or not. So this is a very important step in your pre-task planning to see that, whether you have done a good job, whether your workers find it really helpful process or not. Do PTP. If you haven't started, just do it. Don't emphasize on perfection. Perfection comes after you repeat it. Do it more and more and more, and you will see the shortcomings. You will find the gap. You will find the issues in the process, and little by little, you can improve it. Get workers involved. I constantly talk about it. We need workers' perspective. They are the main users. They are people who perform the actual task, so we learn from them. And if we want to improve the pre-task planning process, if we want to improve our site safety, climate, culture, we do need to talk to workers. We do need to ask them directly and incorporate what they say where possible. Simplify the process to see where they complain. What part is difficult for them? What part is not really helpful? To streamline the process, remove unnecessary steps. So we can learn this if we initiate, if we repeat, if we assess, and if we adjust. So this is a very straightforward process. So we have provided all these tools, and they are all available on the web page I provided, cpwr.com/PTP. You can go and download these. We have incorporated a QR code on all the products that we have developed. That is a channel to communicate with us, with our team. If you used our products, if you have any comments, if you have any questions, and if you would like give us feedback to improve the quality of these products, please use the QR codes on the tools that we have developed on these documents, and just simply write to us. If you would like to leave your contact information, that would be great. So because we can get in touch with you and further discuss your points and work on it. At the end of this webinar, I would like to acknowledge all the companies who contributed to this project, generously shared their resources. They let us go to their job sites. They shared their time and expertise with us to make all these products happen. They're all on this screen. I would like to thank them all. And again, I would like to thank Mr. Jerry Rivera from NECA Washington, D.C. chapter. Jerry is the safety director of NECA Washington, D.C. chapter. He's been our main advisor throughout this project. Great comments. Thank you so much, Jerry, if you are in this audience. And with that, I would like to conclude. And here is my contact information. And if you would like to reach out, if you would like to further discuss, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me through this email address or phone number. And I think, Jess, we have some time for Q&A.
We definitely do. Thanks, Babak. Great information. Really good project. We actually got the same question both during registration and during your presentation, and it's a pretty straightforward one, so I'll start with this. Are any of the resources that you have developed available in Spanish, or is it just English?
That is a very great question, and because we just released these products about 2 weeks ago, I would say, and thanks to our communications team, Bill Wright and Shredda Benjamin, for making this page live. So we made it about 2 weeks ago. And that is on our to-do list. We will definitely develop a Spanish version, and as soon as they're available, we will announce them. But thank you so much for the reminder, definitely.
Great, thank you. Okay, the next question, I think you touched a little bit on during your presentation and sort of how flexible this process is, but how often would you say a job hazard analysis or PTP should be performed? Should it be for each shift, before each new job?
Well, that's a great question, and we constantly get that. My suggestion is that we should do that before each task at least once a day. And as I also discussed, construction job sites are dynamic. Things are constantly changing, and new hazards may evolve throughout the shift. So it is very important to capture and also huddle back with the crew to address those. And that's important piece. But we see some disagreement between practitioners. Some people consider JHA for more complicated tasks, and they say it is not required to do it every day. But if we don't need to go into all details every day, but we need to repeat them. Because sometimes we hear that, unfortunately, some managers or crew supervisors may say, today's task is the same as yesterday. It is not. I always say, today's task is not the same as yesterday. What if the weather condition has changed? Whether someone was absent yesterday, whether everybody on our crew is on the same page, is there any new crew on the job site? Is there a new tower crane on the job site? There are a lot of things that we need to briefly discuss. So my suggestion and my recommendation is that we should at least do it once a day before each task.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. I have a couple questions about who should be included and how to get workers involved. So the first question is just in general, you talked about getting worker feedback, but who do you think should be included all around in completing JHA?
I am not clear on this question. You mean who from workers' side or?
From both sides. I mean, who from management, or are there other people outside of just the management and workers that should be considered?
I believe for each task, people who are directly involved, because when we go to a job site and if a crew is going to do conduit installation, for instance, today, I believe the crew members, workers should be involved in the process and their feedback should be considered. And also crew supervisors and superintendents, safety and health managers on the job site. Some people say owners. I don't think owner representatives are really needed to be involved in everyday process, but the crew members, crew supervisors, and I believe safety managers and project managers, that should be a typical combination.
Yeah. Okay. And how often would you say if folks are using the assessment of their PTP process, how often should they use the worker feedback form?
That is very subjective, and it all depends on how big your project is, because a crew might be for a small subcontractor, their job on a job site might be just one week. But for some bigger projects or for some bigger contractors, they might be on a job site for 2 years or 3 years. So it all depends on the job site. But if you could do that, let's say if you are doing a 1-year project, I believe at least every 3 months, that makes sense, at least to get some perspective during different stages of the project. But again, it's very subjective. I cannot give an exact number, but if you have a small project, at least once or maybe twice to see before, after. For larger projects, maybe every 3 or 4 months, that would make sense.
Okay. And do you have any recommendations for how to get workers involved, how to motivate them to want to be involved in the pre-task planning process?
I would like to speak based on what we've observed on the job sites. And again, from one of the research partners we had, they established a process, they called it ORM. And in that ORM process, what they did was, it was one method to get workers involved. They would give the opportunity to workers to run the PTP meeting. If workers were on the job site for at least 1 week, so then they would be eligible to run the meeting, and they would provide training to everybody. So that was very important because workers could see themselves as part of the process. And another thing that I also discussed today during the presentation was, when you do daily walkthroughs, that I still say that you need to do it at least once a day, worker representatives. When I say worker representatives, I mean from the work crew, not unions, associations. They might be there, but there should be a member, at least a member from the work crew directly. So this way they will have voice, they will be closely involved, and they'll be empowered because they see that their perspective is considered, their feedback is working, and they're part of the deal. So these are different ways that they can get workers closely involved in the process.
Okay, and looking at it from, I guess, the alternative perspective, how do you create buy-in from leadership to implement these types of things into daily processes?
That's a big question. So the first thing that I would say is that we understood that there were some gaps in the process based on discrepancy that we saw in methods of delivery, development of pre-task planning, JHA terminology. So we tried to help get this process closer and make it a little more consistent and streamline it. And I would like to mention Sarah Brooks here because we were talking about a similar topic with Sarah the other day, and her perspective was that time is critical on construction job sites, right? So with this process, and when we try to streamline the process, management can see that they're saving some time on their projects. Time is critical. And also, they see more involvement from their workers in the process. And then when they see these things happen, they will realize the importance of that. And another thing that I would like to mention is that it's peer-to-peer. When a company uses something and it goes successfully, they recommend it to other companies. And I'm glad to say that we have received a lot of feedback through the QR code that we provided on the first checklist. And some major contractors started using these products. And then when they realized the importance and the value of the products, they started sharing with their subcontractors and with their affiliates and other partners on the project. So these are the ways we are trying to exercise, and we are trying to highlight to managers and leadership to realize the value of these products in terms of streamlining and optimizing their process and hopefully improving their buy-in to the process.
Great, thank you. Just backtracking a little bit, I know you touched on this at the very beginning of your presentation, but we've gotten several questions in about sort of the distinction between JHA, JSA, and PTP. Can you explain that again a little bit?
Well, yeah, definitely. So there is no absolute answer to that. I'm sorry to say that, because even with if we go by definition, we see that, as I said, some practitioners believe that JHA is for more complicated or bigger tasks, and that doesn't need to be done every day. But when we move to another company, we see that they use the same term, but for every day, right? Some folks call it JSA. I have a little bit of disagreement because it's job safety analysis, but construction job site is not all about safety. We have health hazards too. So when we call it job safety analysis, it feels like we are ignoring the health side of the deal. So, but when we call it job hazard analysis, it's more comprehensive. So to be honest, there is no absolute answer to that, but these are things that we have learned. And the reason we decided to go with PTP, based on the interviews that we have conducted, close to 200 interviews that we have conducted over the past 4 years. And the comments that we got from industry advisory group, they suggested that pre-task planning is more comprehensive, it is easier, and probably it is for everyday use. So that's the reason we decided, but hopefully one day we'll reach that consistency in our industry to understand and see what each of these terms really mean in reality.
Great, thanks. Have you, in your research, come across anything on the effectiveness of video-based pre-task planning and if it can improve communication, if there are some benefits maybe for workers that don't have higher level literacy skills and things like that?
Well, I would definitely like to discuss this with who posted this question, because this is a very important question. I feel like this is a definitely video. We discussed that and we promote that to use some visual aids to minimize text in our planning, because long wordy documents are nothing really interesting to anybody, and nobody really likes to sit and read through the whole document. Videos, pictures, whiteboarding, these are all great tools to use to improve quality of communication. But my counter argument to this question is that I don't say that, yeah, this is great, but my counter argument is that, can workers use their mobile phones on the job site? If we are talking about video pre-task planning, whether they are allowed to use their mobile devices or cell phones on the job site. So that is a little bit in gray area to me, that if we implement video pre-task planning, whether we let workers use their cell phones, is there any issue with that? I think these are some unclear aspects of this to me that I would definitely like to further discuss it. My contact information is on the page. If you would like to get with me and discuss this, I'm open to the idea.
Great, thank you. How important is it to have an emergency plan on all PTPs?
This was one of the additional pieces of information we added to the form, because we just learned from our observations and interviews that it is important to repeat that. So when job sites have that emergency, or for evacuation, or even for nurse trailer, or if they have any medical facility on the job site, it is important to let workers know where it is located and keep repeating that. It is very important, because we see that work crews change. Workers come in, and after a few days they may leave, and some new workers may come on board. So it is very important to include that in pre-task plan, or at least verbally mention that, and make sure that every day we say that, hey, nurse trailer or the medical facilities located such as, we provide the address or wherever it is located on job site, contact information, and let them know that where the contact information is available on the job site. So I think it is very important to have it as part of the pre-task plan process or job hazard analysis.
Okay. Do you have any recommendations on how crew leaders can better recognize existing or predictable hazards? And that's actually, I'm going to go, before you answer that, there's a second question from a different person, but I feel like they kind of go together. So with that first one being, how can crew leaders better recognize existing hazards? The follow-up question I want to add is, do you believe in crafting a library of readily available JHAs/JSAs, which would already have the major hazards identified?
So what was the first piece, Jess? I'm sorry.
How can crew leaders better recognize existing or predictable hazards?
I think we discussed this. Based on my recommendation is being present on the job site. Go to the job site frequently. Ask workers. and also get with other crews. It's very important to get different perspectives because they might have something on their plan that we may not be aware of that. So we see that on some effective projects, they have foreman meetings on a weekly basis or sometimes even daily. So they just huddle and for a few minutes, they just go over the plans that they have and they just brief each other on things that they are going to do. So this way, they will learn about potential hazards coming from the other angles. And also when they go to the job sites frequently, they can see, they can observe that and they can learn from their work crews. So this is my answer. But to the second part, that whether having a library of JHA, JSAs, definitely they are helpful, but we should keep in mind that it's not one fits all. You know, we might have just the basics. We might have some major hazards associated with an operation or a task, but we cannot copy and use it for different job sites. Each job site has its own requirements. Each job site has its own hazards, unique hazards and characteristics. So it is very important if we use that as a basis, we have to consider the current site conditions. We have to consider project attributes. Wherever we go, we can just only use that as a basis, as a foundation, but it's not final answer. So if you would like to have it, yes, perfect. But don't copy and use it for different projects.
Yeah. Okay. How important are stop work, pause work, etc. type considerations?
I think this is slightly outside the scope of this project, and I don't think I'm in the position to comment on that. So I'm sorry, but I passed this question.
Sure. Let me see. Sorry, we've got a bunch of questions left. Okay. Did CPWR do any benchmarking of these models, for example, against the UC Berkeley JHA model templates? I don't know if you're familiar with those.
No, we haven't done it. So because, as I mentioned, we recently released these products and we have not done any assessment or diffusion evaluation. So no, we haven't done that.
Okay, thank you. I think this might be a little bit outside of the scope of this project, but because you also work on the exposure control database, I'm going to ask, is there a checklist or guidance in place to protect workers from lead poisoning?
Not that I'm aware of, but as just mentioned, so we have an exposure control database, ECD, that CPWR developed about 5 years ago. And Sarah Brooks is our lead industrial hygienist on that. She manages the database. And in that database, we have a branch for lead. So you can go and use that system to estimate potential exposure to lead hazard based on the data that we have in the system. But if we have any checklist, no, we don't have any checklist for that. But that tool, ECD, is available. You can use that.
Thanks. And I just put the link to that in the chat. During your research, did you happen to have the opportunity to visit with or interview personnel on a Department of Energy site?
No, we didn't have any interview with DOE sites yet.
Although we do have others at CPWR who work very closely with DOE, and we do some, I believe, some training on DOE sites. So if there are follow-up questions related to that, we might be able to put you in touch with some other folks at CPWR. So feel free to reach out to either of us. All right, let's see, winding down. How is the performance of work in accordance with the plans and specifications and quality control addressed in pre-task planning? So basically, how is work performance and quality control addressed in the pre-task planning process?
I think this question is talking about multiple things. If we are talking about pre-task planning, so this is how to perform a task, right? And QA/QC comes after. And I think these are two different elements. And the the planning and checking process. However, if we are talking about these products and tools that we have developed, one way to capture some of the issues from work crew's perspective would be end of shift, to see whether things happen as we planned or there were some issues and how to address those issues. This is one way, to continuously check and improve the plan, and see whether, how effective our daily plan or daily plans work. If they don't work, where they have issues, and I think that's the only way I can say. But in construction, we have usually we have a team who is responsible for quality control, quality assurance. And I don't think it is very feasible to fold everything under pre-task plan. But at the end of the shift, at the end of the week, so we can have some quality checks. But I don't have anything beyond this related to pre-task planning and process quality.
Okay. I think this might be our last question, and we will definitely use some of these other questions that we didn't get through to inform future webinars. And for anyone who is, again, interested in following up with Babak or myself, and perhaps getting put in touch with others here, we're always happy to do that. But the last question I wanted to ask is that during your research, did you get any feedback from workers who did find the PTP useful and very important part of their job to perform it daily?
Definitely. A great number. If I cannot give an exact number right now, but a lot of them found it really helpful. And not only about the task, they found that that morning huddle or PTP meeting as an opportunity to exchange with their peers, to talk to their crew supervisor, especially when the session is more interactive. Workers usually find it more helpful. And yes, definitely we learned that multiple times.
Great, thank you. And I'll just add to that, our R2P program has done some survey research that's related to pre-task planning, related to pre-job planning before the work ever starts as well. We did 2 surveys over the last few years, one on struck by prevention and one on fall prevention. And I'll drop the links to the reports for those in the chat, but essentially some of the findings really pointed to the fact that a lack of planning was a big contributor to incidents that did happen, that it's recognized by both management and the employees that better planning leads to better prevention. We also have a number of findings related to some of these topics, like, is daily enforcement and daily planning really necessary? We found that, for example, with fall protection, in order to get folks to regularly wear the fall protection and wear it properly, it's very helpful for them to know that it's required and for that requirement to be reiterated regularly on the job site. So things like that, we have definitely found in our recent research that there are a lot of benefits to engaging in these type of planning processes. And I did see one other question come up about who should be involved, and I think Babak said this, alluded to it many times, but really, as many people are involved in the work, including decision makers and those doing the tasks, everyone should be involved in the planning.
Or at least their voice should be heard,
Exactly.
At least time to time we should have those follow-ups with workers and get their feedback and make sure that they are incorporated where possible. Great.
And Babak, is there anything else you'd like to add before we?
No, that was I would like to appreciate everybody for their time and attending this webinar. Great questions and pretty I think it was a long session with a lot of questions, a lot of great questions. And if we were not able to answer your questions, please get in touch with me. Here is my contact information. And I would like to further discuss your questions. And I would like to thank Jessica for coordinating all these webinars and our communications team at CPWR, Bill Wright and Shredda Benjamin. And again, thank you so much for your time and attending this webinar.